Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem. So this is a story from my own life over Shabbos that leads me to wanting to tell the story, and it's a very simple story. It's after davening Shacharis and Musaf, so I came home and I was all excited to sit and learn the Kamar Rebbe. I was going to learn Nesiv Mitzvosecha, and my daughter needed to be read to. She wanted to be read to. And honestly, only through learning the Kamar Rebbe the week before, I understood that the most important thing was to put the Kamar Rebbe down and sit and read with my daughter. And she brought me this book to read. And so on Shabbos, at least a person can be, a little bit meshugana and see the simanim baderech. And adrabah, it's not meshugana to see the simanim baderech. A person lives their life in hashgacha pratis, and the goal is to ensure that we understand the measure in which to see the incidental events in our lives, as Rabbi Nachman describes in the 54th teaching. The person has to see the simanim baderech, that Hashem sends them every single day, the machshava of the day, the emotions of the day, and the diburim of the day, which come about from all sorts of places. Kal v'chomer, something that's kodesh hakadoshim. So amongst a few books, we were going to read 4.5 books because she's 4.5, so we're going to stop the fifth book, the fifth book in the middle. And the second book was Caps for Sale. And I love Caps for Sale, but this time I was reading it after davening Shacharis and Musaf and having wanted to learn the Kamar Rebbe. And so I saw just in the framework of Purim an insight that I think that the book really, really captures in a very beautiful way. Now, Dvarim Gedolim Inim B'Mikra, and anytime a Jewish person does anything in this world, it's a Davar Gadol. And Rabbi Nachman already tells us, and all of the study can tell us, that we have the ability to read texts that are written by authors, irrespective of what the author's intention was. There's a theory of literary reading, which is called the death of the author, which was kind of a symptom or a pre-iteration of postmodernism, where there was a detachment from the singular value of a text. And the death of the author was the notion that once the text is written, so it's no longer connected to the authorial intent, and each person has the freedom of interpretation as they see fit. Now, obviously, Yiddishkeit does not believe in such a thing. Yiddishkeit believes in the fundamental authorship of a text, but there's also an element of the death of the author, where a person is no longer going to be identified as the author of the book because their neshama rests within the book. And in the secret of the books, the texts of Jewish people kind of have a trace within them of a neshama, of a nefesh at least. So it's our ability to read it from, we have the right to darshan anything. Kal v'chomer, something that's written by a Jewish neshama. I don't even know how to pronounce the name. It's Esfer Slobodkina. It's like so instead of darshaning the name of Slobodka and the name, I'm just mispronouncing it, but it sounds like Efshar to me. And so we have the ability to enter into Dimyon, especially in the month of Adar, which is a month of Kofiyut, which is a month of monkey business, which is a month of coming to terms with the monkey-like nature of human experience. The Zohar has a litany of relative relationships that are measured in accordance with one side being monkey-like or ape-like. So there's the fact that vis-a-vis the other side, the side of holiness is like a human being, and the other side is like a monkey. Vis-a-vis the rest of the world, the Jewish people, in the essence of their soul, represent authenticity, and everything else is considered as a monkeyish, kind of apish reenactment or imitation. And then, so we tend to see this monkey business as a negative symptom. But then we see that the Zohar Kadosh also says that that Klal Yisrael is like a kof, is like a monkey in the face of the Shechina, and that all of the Nevi'im are like monkeys, so to speak, in the face of Moshe Rabbeinu. And that there's a certain union of the kof, the kedusha, the kofiyut, the kedusha of becoming like a monkey, hamelech oif kuf beschoik, as the Sefer Yetzirah says, that the month of Adar is hinged and textually bound by the letter kuf, which represents kof, which represents kuf vav pei, which is the secret of pretending and playing around and monkey business. And so the monkey business necessary in interpreting a child's book to kind of bring out a message for Purim, notwithstanding, Adraba Ipcha Mistabra, Adraba means Adarba, it means that Adar is here because the monkey shows that it's Adaraba, it's the opposite of what you thought. And we're going to enter into this teaching, Caps for Sale. So just a framing of the tale, and then we'll go into the tale itself and we'll read it. That what Purim represents, what Purim represents on a spiritual level, at least through the lens of, not at least, through the lens of the Arizal, and then brought down through all of the interpretations that take place afterwards, in particular the Beis Medrash of the Baal Shem Tov and his Talmidim, and the Gra and his Talmidim, and the Ramchal, and all of the ways in which Purim is understood in the Rashash. Everybody has a centrality to Purim. But what's taking place in Purim, according to the Arizal, is that there's a Nasira taking place. There's a Nasira, there is a surgical separation that is taking place between the Jewish people and God. Between Kudsha Barichu, which is our sense of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we'll see, we're going to apply some other synonyms to that as well for the sake of understanding the key to the story. That's the light of Hashem, Kudsha Barichu, the illumination of certainty and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in reality. And there's Shrinte. Shrinte is Malchus. Shrinte is empty. Shrinte has nothing of its own. Shrinte is the Shechina, which is the externalization of the inside, like we've spoken about. It's the process of HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealing himself within limitation, as limitation, within the hearts of all of the Jewish people, to the degree that when we enter into exile, the Shechina enters into exile. And these two kind of polarities, these two identifiable points in the relationship between us and God, is referred to as Kudsha Barichu v'Shchinte. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the revelation of Hashem in a clarified way, and that Shchinte or Malchus is Klal Yisrael, which without the illuminating light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we're absolutely devoid and empty. When we have the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu attached to us, so then we're illuminated because we're a great container. Now, these two positions, so to speak, are really reflective of two modalities of the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and also the way that we experience ourselves. And they're referred to as Zer Anpin and Malchus. Zer Anpin and Malchus. Zer Anpin represents Kudsha Barichu. It represents that transcendent principle of the masculine impulse to draw down from above and express below, to be mashpia. That's the place that the or comes from. And Malchus is the feminine counterpart to that, which is receptive in its essence, which is empty and hollowed out so that it can be primed to receive that which comes from above it. It's referred to as the Makabel. Now, the synonyms that we find bring us all the way back before Bereshis, all the way after Mashiach Tzidkenu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef. The synonyms to describe Zer Anpin and Malchus, Kudsha Barichu v'Shchinte, the masculine tendency to express from above to below, and the feminine principle of receiving from below to above. There's innumerable binaries that Panemius HaTorah is populated by, that Niglos HaTorah is populated by, that allows this one key to the sugya to really animate the entire landscape of Torah. Ultimately, what it means for our sake is that what is fundamentally principled at the core of the Jewish relationship is that it's a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just as we have relationships in our lives, so too we have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My dear friend, Rabbi Yaakov Danishevsky, wrote an incredible book on this in terms of attachment, which really defines, and it's the best opening towards the path of attachment theory as being applied to what it means to have a relationship with God, to take that notion seriously. And the relationship vis-a-vis us and God is almost reflective in the relationship between us and vis-a-vis others. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kudsha Barichu v'Shchinte. That's what's being mushpa downwards. That's the light of Zer Anpin, so to speak. That's Hashem shining his light down. And Klal Yisrael and the world are Malchus. We're the outside receptacle that needs to receive that light, and without that light, we're empty. And so too in our interpersonal relationships, each person is a mashpia and every person is also a makabel. It's not a gendered notion, so to say. Each and every person is composed of both of these parts at every moment. The question is the emphasis and the essential expression of what the innermost point is. But every person has the masculine tendency and the feminine principle of receptivity within themselves. There's nothing that doesn't have both of those principles at the very same moment. Everything is a combination and a tethering together of these two oppositional impulses of masculine expression and feminine receptivity, otherwise known as chasadim and gevuros, the potentiation towards externalization and the tendency towards limitation, which ensures the emergence of something new. This rests at the core of existence, and it expresses itself in the most fundamental day-to-day encounters that we have in our lives. And one of the things that we have to orient ourselves towards is that when it comes to the proper relationship between Zer Anpin, which represents clarity, and Malchus, which represents the lack of clarity, and all of the opposites that fit into those two categories. That the first teaching that Pnimius HaTorah teaches us is that it's a relational process. It's not a one fell swoop type of thing. It's not one stage you're in and one stage you're out, but rather it's a slow and steady development that grows upon itself in a sequential and stabilized, natural way, to the point that there are 7 stages, so to say, of the relationship that Klal Yisrael has with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Malchus has with Zer Anpin, or that we have with our loved ones in terms of our relationships. And it goes through this waxing and this waning of ascent and descent in terms of the relationality. Once we accept the fact that it's a process orientation towards the development of the relationship between the illumination of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the lens of Zer Anpin, which represents Ein Oid Milvado Mamish, and our receptivity of Malchus, which represents emptiness and absence completely, that it's a gradational relational space in which there's always an ebb and a flow that's going on between both sides. That's Aleph. The Arizal charts the entirety of history, both ontological and the meta-historical kind of unconscious of history in this very sugya. It is a slow and steady process of the relationship, the ebbing and the flowing, the false starts and the intimations of the relationship between Zer Anpin and Malchus, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revealed presence as we grasp it by way of Eino and Milvado, and our own lived experience as human beings who are simply trying to reduce our egos so that we get out of our way enough to enjoy life as it is meant to be enjoyed, with the Tainug of Emunah that shines forth from a vessel that allows itself to be emptied. It's all one story of the ebb and flow of this relationship. Now, Zer Anpin, for our purposes, because it represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu and it represents transcendence and it represents the clarity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's not where the fixing needs to be done. Zer Anpin always has its own fixing to be done. It has to be mamshich everything from Bina, and Bina has to schlep it from Chachma v'chule, but that's not part of the conversation right now. When we start talking about Zer Anpin and Malchus, Zer Anpin, that perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being mashpia down to us by way of an influx of spiritual clarity, is going to be seen as the apex of the experience. And so Zer Anpin represents the static presence of a fundamental awareness of godliness. And Shechina is what waxes and wanes. Malchus starts off as a very, very tiny point that is absolutely nothing of itself. And it grows and it grows and it grows until it can once again come back to its original place to be operating at the same level that the Zer Anpin is operating at, which is referred to as his crown and her crown are equal. That point where Malchus, which is concealment, reveals itself to in truth be as saturated with certainty as certainty itself, in spite of the fact that Malchus appears and reveals herself by way of uncertainty. Again, and that can be applied in all sorts of metaphors. Chevra, I'm going to pause just because I have a live audience right now, just by nod of heads. You guys with me? Say there. We'll go back. I appreciate it. The relationship between Zer Anpin and Malchus is that Zer Anpin is always whole and Malchus is always the one that's deficient. Modeled in the sun and the moon type of relationship, the sun is big, it illuminates, it fills the universe, and the Levana also is big and it illuminates the universe. And then the Levana is the one that comes to Hashem and says, like, okay, there's a problem here. Both things cannot be fully illuminative at once. Masculine and feminine, concealment and revelation, transcendence, which is Zer Anpin, and immanence, which is Malchus, they can't be operating in one fell swoop of their full force, because then both negate each other in their essence, and it reveals that everything is unified as one, and then there's no bechira, there's no process. And so Hashem Kavyachal says, you know what, Taka, it's true, go and make yourself smaller. Now Malchus, not only did it have the right claim, not only did the moon have the right claim, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling the Levana that you and go make yourself smaller. Hashem is not making the Levana smaller. Hashem is you go and actively make yourself smaller, because that's a Messias of Malchus. Malchus is diminution. Malchus is the waxing and the waning that descends down to nothingness, kimat nothingness, not because it's empty, but because it's so fundamentally confident in the every last drop that it maintains that it doesn't need more than one drop, because it knows that with one drop it has everything. And that nukuda pnimius, that innermost point, which we're going to see in the story, is the part that always remains. And then from that place, Malchus grows and it grows and it grows, and it comes into its own place of revelation. That's the process, that's the arch of history. Until Malchus ultimately goes above Zer Anpin in the secret of Eishes Chayla Teres Baila. And in the time of Adam Arishon and Chava being born, as well as in the time of the historical process of Klal Yisrael, because Malchus is such a concealed thing, because Malchus is such a delicate thing, and it has nothing of itself. It's what David HaMelech is crying out all the time of Dal va'ani ani, I have nothing, or like Esther Malka screams in the Beis HaSlamim, Keli, Keli, lama azavtani, that I don't have anything, that I'm left without anything. Because Malchus is so delicate, it has to be protected. And in the process of that protection that's given to Malchus, the entire system of the Arizal is in the process of taking shape. The way in which the relationship between Zer Anpin and Malchus takes shape is a gradational process that is patient, that will ultimately lead to its final destination. The final destination is something called panim bepanim, a face-to-face encounter. The face-to-face encounter, both vis-a-vis human being and other, as well as vis-a-vis Nishmas Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the recognition that I am fundamentally aware of the inherent value that I have within myself. Nishmas Yisrael burns within my heart to the degree that there is no suffix in terms of the role that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, made himself need for Nishmas Yisrael in the Welt, and that Hashem loves Nishmas Yisrael more than anything. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one when he's Heitiach Dvarim Klapei Mala, and he calls Hashem out, Kaviyachol, and he says, Hashem, you can't blame Klal Yisrael. You can't judge them unfavorably. That's a panim el panim relationship. That's the confidence of speaking face to face with a fundamental awareness of the fact that the relationship is real. There's an inherency to the relationship. But if there's a panim el panim relationship between Zer Anpin and Malchus, as reflected in Adam and Chava, so what that does is it exposes the backside of Adam and the backside of Chava. Because if we're thinking about two human beings that are being created, Adam and Chava can have a back-to-back relationship with each one's face facing in the opposite direction. And then they can turn towards each other where their faces are facing each other and the backs are facing the opposite directions. So when it comes to Pnimiyas HaTorah, the face, in that fundamental awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite revelation in Metzias, there's a cool, calm, and collected confidence that is not worried about chitzonius. It's not worried about getting stuck in all of the spiritual quagmire and egoisms that we get lost in. It's not so afraid. It's not so traumatized. It's not so delicate in its sense. It's not so meek. The soul knows its strength in a place of panim el panim. And therefore, in the face-to-face relationship, the back can be exposed. The back is a place of sensitivity, and when something is vulnerable, it's the backside, it's the chitzonius that is most susceptible to pollution. In a mature state of panim el panim relationship, when there's a confidence and we don't have to protect those vulnerable stages, so then it can be a face-to-face relationship where both backsides are revealed and we're not concerned about falling prey into externalization. But in the delicate and initial stages of the relationship between Zer Anpin and Malchus, so it was a very different type of relationship. It was referred to as an achor ba'achor relationship. It was almost like a Janus-like figure, Kaviyachol, that was created where Adam and Chava shared a back. Adam's face was one way and Chava's face was the other way, but what one ate, the other enjoyed from. And this back-to-back relationship is so codependent and so fundamentally tethered into itself, primarily because of the vulnerability of this stage, that the backside cannot be revealed, because at this immature stage of Malchus just getting to know its true strength, the moment it's exposed to any sense of loss or any sense of confusion, it's going to fall down again because it's not going to remember its true strength. And therefore the chitzonius, the achorayim of Malchus, needs to be fundamentally protected because it's too delicate now to be exposed to the harsh nature of spiritual experience. And therefore there's a protective bond that's created between Zer Anpin and Malchus, Kaviyachol, which protects the achorayim of Malchus and Zer Anpin to the degree that they share a back. In this immature relationship, there is a fundamental codependency. Each are fundamentally tethered to one another in a symbiotic way, primarily because of that immaturity, because there's not enough confidence on behalf of one element of the relationship, which is always both elements of the relationship, because again, we all have a Malchus in us. Because of the hyper-dependency and because of the terror of doing anything in an independent way, which is rooted in the belief that I don't have what it takes. Leis li magram me klum, I don't have what it takes. Malchus doesn't have what to stand on. So we remain in that dependent, immature, infantile stage of a shared back, which what one experiences, the other experiences. And that was the relationship. That was the relationship that Klal Yisrael had with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was a back-to-back relationship. We were fundamentally dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We were fundamentally tethered in. We couldn't imagine what it would be like to live without HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was an infantile relationship. We were stuck in it because we couldn't imagine what would happen the moment we untethered ourselves from the relationship. And therefore, we remained obedient to the relationship since Matan Torah with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to one degree or another. On that back-to-back level where we hadn't yet developed the self-identity of Malchus. In that back-to-back stage, Malchus is receiving its moichin from what? It's receiving its moichin from Zer Anpin. Zer Anpin is giving the moichin of Bina into Malchus. Malchus can't do anything on her own yet. Malchus doesn't have the confidence to recognize the fundamental role that it plays in the relationship. That Malchus doesn't know the true secret that without Malchus, there's no revelation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak. That without Nishmas Yisrael, there's no purpose to creation. And without a purpose to creation, then the entire desire of a Kadosh Baruch Hu to be Mizgal himself and the Dir B'Tachtonim can't be revealed. And the secret of Avodah L'Tzarech Gavoa, and the need to fundamentally engage in our knowledge that Hashem needs us. That's the Panim El Panim relationship. But until we get to that place, we're stuck in that dependency where we feel that we can't do anything on our own. And so there's a back-to-back relationship. And then comes Purim. And what happens at Purim is as follows. It's a replication of what happens with Adam and Chava. Let's say it with Adam and Chava first. Now with Adam and Chava, there's a back-to-back relationship. There's a dependency where Chava does not yet have the capacity to express her own inherent worth. Esther Amalka does not have the capacity yet to enter into Achashverosh, to take that Sarbit HaZahav, which is the secret of Gaiva de Kedusha, which is the secret of Nishmas Yisrael realizing the role that we actually play. And therefore, it was eating from whatever Mordechai was giving. It was eating from whatever Zer Anpin was being mashpia. Adam was giving over to Chava. But then there came a time where it was time for the dependent, immature stage of relationship to stop, and the stages of the painful development of maturity to take place, which is the growth into independence, and then coming to terms with a mutual dependency rather than a codependency. The back-to-back is a codependency. The Nesira is a severing of that codependency. It's an entrance into a sense of independence, which will ultimately lead to a sense of an interwoven sense of interdependency, where each person is giving what the other needs, and each person is receiving what the other has to give. And so what happens is HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts Adam to sleep. There's a tadema that falls on Adam. Adam falls into unconsciousness. He forgets. He falls into translation. He falls into losing sight of the original goal. He goes into a place of concealment. He goes into a place that we all go into, in that place of dreaming, in that place of slumber, in that place of being asleep. And in that slumber, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does, Kaviyachol, is he's menaser the Shechina from Zer Anpin. He's menaser Chava from Adam Harishon. He surgically removes Chava. He takes Malchus, so to speak, out of its interdependency within Zer Anpin, and it enables Malchus to emerge as its own thing, so to speak, which can now begin the process of taking on its own essential value, inherent worth. Malchus, yes, it's going to be uncomfortable now. It's going to be frightened. It's going to be susceptible to concealment. But at the same point, it's the slow and steady process of the development of moichin the godless, of maturity, where Malchus, Nishmas Yisrael, comes to realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way that you've created it, Baruch Hashem, the way that you've created it, so to speak, is that you need us as much as we need you. As the tzaddikim taught us. Again, the tzaddikim told us this. This is what Megillas Esther is all about. And so what happens in Purim is there's a surgical removal, and Chava begins to take on a certain sense of independence, and it's slow and it's steady and it's concealed, and a person is forlorn. And slowly but surely it comes to be revealed that each and every person, Nishmas Yisrael, the self, has always had what it needed. It may have lost everything that Zer Anpin was giving into it. It may have lost all of the insight that was coming from above it. But in the end of the day, what it finds in its surgical removal from Zer Anpin is that it has what to stand on. It has an akuda pnimis of its own. It has the bas ayin to stand upon. And from there, it develops the confidence to then come back and choose HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a new way. To choose the relationship not by way of dependency and urgency in a sense of, oh my God, I can't go, I'll eat you up, I love you so I can't be removed for a second because I can't live without, etc., etc. Adarabba, it breaks free from that initial stage of immature dependency and that infantile notion of fundamental connectivity and the sense that anything can be fully unified, other than God himself, so to speak. And it enters into the delicate process of being disillusioned and then choosing a healthy, good enough relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and with others, which comes with our own volitional choice. That's the process of the Nasira, of losing everything that we had artificially, all of the moichin I was receiving from Zer Anpin, feeling forlorn, in that forlornness, identifying the core of the self, and that in truth, even though I'm surgically removed from where I thought I was getting my sustenance from, what I thought I needed in order to serve Hashem, I come to a place of identifying that I'm okay, I have enough, and then I enter into a relationship in a new way. That's kimu v'kiblu masha kiblu kvar. We received the Torah by way of kfiyah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu forced it upon us, literally forced it upon us. We lived as if we cannot live without you, Hashem, that there's no reality in stepping away from you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That the moment I deviate is the moment I'm struck down. And so we maintain that dependency that's based on fear and a sense of, oh my gosh, only if I'm good enough, only if I'm good enough, which always remains true to a certain degree. But then comes Purim, and what Purim is, kimu v'kiblu masha kiblu kfar, they receive that which they received already, but they receive it in a new way. They receive it by way of volitional choice. We're no longer being forced. We receive it by way of having tasted Sudas al Achashverosh, having stepped away, having fallen to every ounce of concealment, feeling that I'm so far from God, I have nothing left. I'm empty, I have nothing of my own, I'm left devoid and I have nothing. And then to come from that place and to realize, wow, in the little bit that remains with me, I can now return to everything that I thought I had to put aside, and I can return to the Torah in a new way where I'm no longer dependent, but I have an interdependency. Now the Torah needs me as much as I need the Torah. That's the secret of Purim. And so let's look at this book, Be'ezras Hashem, and I'll try and stop with the diukim, and we'll go weiter. So it's Caps for Sale. The tale of a peddler, some monkeys, and their monkey business. Say that. Okay, so once there was a peddler who sold caps, but he was not like an ordinary peddler, carrying his wares on his back. He carried them on the top of his head. So the neshama in this world is a peddler. The neshama in this world wants to receive something. It wants to have things to sell. It wants possessions. It wants spiritual grasp. It wants to feel, oh, I can do this. I can do that. I'm good at this. I'm good at that. I have this identifying mark about myself. I have this. We want our fares and our wares to sell. We want to sell our things. We feel life is a marketplace, and we feel that we have to possess our spiritual conquests in order to feel valuable about ourselves. Only this peddler, it's the same Indian. This peddler, it's not the same Indian. This peddler was not carrying his wares on his back, right? He wasn't just feeling the bodily need for that sense of, I need accomplishments in my life to feel good about myself. I need wares to carry and sell. I need identifiable marks of who I am, what I stand for. He carried it on his head. He said, I'm not like that. I don't carry it on my back. I carry it on my head. I have levushe hasechel, chachmos me chachmos shonot. Different chachmos, different ways of thinking, different grasps, different ideas, different notions, all of these wonderful things that a person can sell, all of the chachma in the world. He carried them on the top of his head. They were ready at hand. First, he had his own checkered cap, then a bunch of gray caps, then a bunch of brown caps, then a bunch of blue caps, and at the very top, a bunch of red caps. So I'm not going to be a meshugana, but let's look at this. There are 17 caps, right? So Gematria Tov, Gematria we spoke about in Adir Bamarom today, the Shem Aleph, Hey, Vav, Hey, which is Es HaShamayim Ve'es HaAretz, which is the Shem of Das, which means connecting above and below, 17 hats. But let's look for a second, right? So he has his first hat. His checkered hat is the only one that's his own identity. That's checkered. He doesn't know what that is. It's all sorts of possibilities. Layered on top of that are 4 quadrants of 4, which is the Shem Havaya, right, has 4. And we know every os of the Shem Havaya has another 4. right? So we can say that it's the 16 halakim of moichin that a person can be masig. I can know chachma, I can know bina, I can know chasadim of das, I can know gevurus of das. I have all of these additional colors. And again, we can darshan, why are they gray? Why are they brown? Why are they blue? Why are they red, right? There's a lot. A person can go back into literature. But he has these 16 halakim, right? Which make him feel good about himself. That's where his tov comes from. How do I know I'm good? Because, this is what I can show for my spiritual conquests of the year. This is what makes me real. There was the checkered hat, which is him, his identity, which is checkered. There's no uniformity there because no self is uniform. Every self is emergent potential. And then there's the 4 layers of Yud Kei Vav Kei Kav Yachol, which is the hasagos that we think we have, all of the dimyonos of hasaga. And again, we know already, dimyonos are wonderful, dimyonos are good. Kol zman that we remember, yonasi tamasi, that afilu be'oina ahu tamim, even though it's fraudulent, it's beautiful. He walked up and down the streets, holding himself very straight so as not to upset his caps, right? This is Givaldic, right? He's walking up and down, aimlessly up and down the streets, appearing important, holding himself very straight, yashar, because when a person feels that this is how I look in the Welt, this is the thing that I identify myself as, this is how the Welt sees me, I have to be very, very careful. I have to ensure that people are always seeing me in the way that I feel that I'm being seen, Rahman al-Islam. Right? Instead of actually being who I am, living in the light of Rabbeinu, which says that ad shelo yichbat leklal, till a person doesn't care whatsoever. But in this moichin, where I have these 16 halakim, 4 times 4, I have all of my moichin, chachma, bina, chasadim, and gurus of das. I didn't want to upset my caps. As he went along, he called caps for sale, 50 cents a cap. Right? Caps for sale. I have product to sell. I have something to sell. Come and buy. Right? Hahu Roichel, the Gemara says, Hahu Roichel, that ran in the street and says, Man ba'ichai, man ba'ichai. It's the Gemara in Gittin. Who wants life? Who wants life? And everyone ran to him and said, we want life. And he says, Mi aisha chafetz chaim, oivyam liras tarufcha, letzor l'shoncha meras, vasecha medaber mirma, sur merav yasei tov bakeshon v'rotva. You want life? Stop speaking badly about yourself, about others, about the Welt. Rav Tzadok says, Hahu Roichel, who is this peddler? He was someone who was noifil and rechilus. And only a person who's nofel and rechilus knows the secret of what is life, not speaking Lashon Hara. We're all peddlers. We're all trying to sell our fares so that the world comes and says, ooh, look at this, look at this. And 50 cents, again, 50, Sharnun, every Yid yearns for the Sharnun. Haman also yearns for the Sharnun, and ultimately Haman is no hasag of the Sharnun. What is transformed when a person wants the Sharnun is that it's only the chelik of Nishmas Yisrael that goes there, but we have to be careful in what the dargos of hasaga we want. 50 cents a cap, 50 cents a cap. One morning he couldn't sell any caps, right? There's an amazing Rabbi Nachman story of a dream that he has where he's walking around town and nobody recognizes him and nobody will give him shalom and he's losing his mind, kavyachol, and he goes further and further and everyone is just being misrachik from himself. This is like this post-apocalyptic, place of, morning dew. You walk out and no one's alive anymore. The world is empty. And, you walk out into the morning dew, you're calling out, there's no one there. So one morning he couldn't sell any caps, right? He couldn't sell any caps. He walked up and down the street. He walked down the street calling caps for sale, 50 cents a cap. Right? He's trying my fare. This is my thing. Because all year he lives with Zer'ant being mashpia moichin to him. He's a mensch because he has all of these asagos. But nobody wanted any caps that morning. Okay. Maybe it was the world of Alexander. It was a no good, very bad, horrible day for everybody that day. Right? Nobody wanted caps that morning. Nobody wanted even a red cap. Right? Why is the red cap the highest? Because the gavuros are the fanciest thing. A person could always, when all else fails, sell gavura. Okay, so nobody even wanted the gavura, the red of it all. He began to feel very hungry. Hungry, right? Suddenly he wakes up. He says, my neshama is searching for something that's that hunger. There's a hunger that's been there all along. I've been eating on people wanting my caps all year, right? And suddenly I'm hungry. But he had no money for lunch. There was nothing inside. There was nothing inside. There was nothing to sustain the self. There was nothing to give birth to himtzia atzma me'atzma. That a person emerges from within themselves, just as a Kadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol emerges from within himself. So to a mensch has to be the self-authentication of that decision that no, I'm ra'i, toiva ani be'einav. I'm beautiful in his eyes. Hashem loves me. But until then, a person begins to feel very hungry and there's no money for lunch. So he says, I think I'll go for a walk in the country, said he. And he walked out of town, slowly, so as not to upset his caps. Slowly, la'at, in the Ari, lahavdil, is how the Kav enters back into the Halal. Because what happens after the lights of Zar'anpin leave is there's an emptiness. It's literally Kavyachol, what that Tzimtzum is. That Tzimtzum is also the same thing that's taking place on Purim, where we lose our divine consciousness and we're left feeling forlorn from spiritual accomplishment. It's the same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol was mitzamtzem his light in order to create a vacant space, Kavyachol, right? There's a vacant space that opens up in the time of Purim. Shushan Irha Bira is the Chalal HaPanui. Mordechai Tzaddik is the Kav. It's the Yesod Da'aba that's nimshach back down. It's the Chachma Keduma that descends down. So he goes for a walk in the country, he said. And he walks slowly out of town, slowly, slowly. Meaning, again, it's not running away. There's a hirur tshuva that allows a person to say, instead of going to look for other places to sell my fares, I can take a walk. I could be misboided. I can actually talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But he was still in the mindset that he didn't want to upset his caps. He walked for a long time until he came to a great big tree. Okay, here already, this is already kimat, clear the Jewish influence. He came to the tree, the Eitz Chaim. He came to that place where he was able to enter in and take a look at himself. He had a hirur tshuva. That's a nice place for a rest thought. The Nesira takes place by way of tirdema nafal alav. That's why we drink at the Suda. That's why the Ramah says it's okay to be Yotze by falling asleep, because the Ikar Inyan of the Nesira is B'layla hahush nodada shnas hamelech, right? It's the waking up from the slumber. It's coming to terms with the fact that Malchus has moichin of its own. So, but first, there's a deep slumber. It was the terror, it was the dreams, it was the running there and here and chasing, letters sent, letters unopened, all of the different metaphors that Chazal used to describe nightmares and dreams. That's the first slumber. So he says, this is a nice place to rest, thought he. And he sat down very slowly under the tree, and he leaned back little by little. Again, little by little, ma'at ma'at, not slowly, slowly, is the way that the Arizal in Eitz Chaim describes Shviras HaKelim. Ma'at ma'at, we're mevar the biur ma'at ma'at. So we have slowly, slowly, little by little. He leaned back against the tree trunk so as not to disturb the cap on his head. He was still in the moichin of not disturbing the caps on his head. Kolzman that I have my product, Kolzman that I have my external spiritual gifts, I have this thing to identify what I'm worthy of. I have this reason that I'm worthy. I have this reason that I'm worthy. As long as that's good in his eyes, he's operating okay. But God forbid he loses his hats. Then he put up his hand to feel if they were straight. First, he checked his checkered cap, right, which is like the stain for him, right? That's his own cap. That's him. He doesn't want that. Then there's the gray caps, the brown caps, the blue caps, the red caps on the very top. They were all there. The Hasagos were there. Check, right? Check my accomplishments for the day. Check, check, check. Hashem loves me because I did this, that, or the other thing. He went to sleep. Falls into the Terdema. He slept for a long time. Right? 70-year slumber. When he woke up, he was refreshed and rested. But before standing up, what's the natural thing that he does? He feels with his hand to make sure his caps are in the right place, right? My hasagos have to be there for me to go on to my trek. Where are my accomplishments at? But all he felt was his own checkered cap. All he felt was the last remaining part of self, that irreducible checkered nature of self, which is that nukuda pnimis that remains in the hidden goodness outside of the 16 extra halakim. He looked to the right of him, no caps. He looked to the left of him, no caps, meaning different forms of hasaga. Where am I good? Where do I struggle? He looked in the back of him, no caps. He looked behind the tree, no caps. Terror. Klal Yisrael wakes up feeling devoid of Torah, mitzvos. Esther Malka's in prison. But then he looked up into the tree, and what do you think he saw? On every branch sat a monkey, and every monkey was a gray or brown or blue or red cap. So what are the monkeys? Monkeys are other. Monkeys are the recognition that a person encounters when they realize that they've been acting like a monkey all along, that they've been imitating a notion of themselves, that they're mimicking a perception of what their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is dependent on, that a person feels that I am worthy because of X, Y, or Z, I am good because of X, Y, or Z, I am loved because of X, Y, or Z, I am valuable because of X, Y, or Z, operating in that peddling notion of I have to develop some quantifiable quantity or capital to myself in order to be worthwhile, to fit into the system. And a person lives that way throughout the year. Every day of the year, a person lives based on their milos, based on what a person is good at. Not because we believe in our Nikudas Tovos, but because we're in such a fevered frenzy to, oh my God, if I don't find something I could hang my hat upon, then I'm going to fall apart. So we force ourselves to develop reasons, artificial reasons that we think we're moving forward. But on Purim, when a person encounters the kofiyut, the kedusha of it all, what a person is faced with is that all of the hasagos, all of the 16 other caps, the yud, k, vav, k, all of the different permutations, the avaya of the yud and the avaya of the hey, v'chule, v'chule, kavyachol, all of them are to a certain degree monkey business in relationship to the innermost point of what my relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom is. That kol zman that I am basing my relationship on something that I've done and making my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu dependent on some sort of performance, I am missing the Nekudas Etzem of what it means to be Nishmas Yisrael, what it means to be Esther Malka, what it means to be able to say, each and every person, every second of Yiddish life, and every mind is being asked that question. That is the one call, that is the Lechel call, right now. But for the entire year, a person lives with all their moichin, and they think they're very serious about their moichin. I'm a very serious person. I'm a balavoida. I'm this, that, or the other thing. I'm secure in my identity. I know what's what. I know up. I know down. I know right. I know left. I know what's above. I know what's below. I know what's right. I know what's wrong. And then suddenly the monkey takes our hasaga, and we come to realize that, oh my gosh, I'm a koif. I'm a monkey in the face of tzaddikim. I'm a monkey in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't know anything. It's dimyon de kedusha, ki'ilu. It's dancing, it's pretend. And suddenly a person has an encounter of terror. What's going to be with me? What's going to be with me without my identifying factors, without the strengths that I have, without the goals that I accomplish, without what I bring to the table? Then the world's going to forget. And we bring this into our relationships and we bring this into our lives. Now, if we lived 1,000,000 years, it wouldn't be allowed. But we don't live 1,000,000 years. And a person lives once in their consciousness, and we cannot allow ourselves to fall prey to this perpetual demand and need for these identifying markers of all of those hats. So Purim comes and reminds a person, no, you know what your hasagos are? They're monkey business. But again, that's not denying them. It's not saying you're bad, you have to be better. It's not saying according to what you can really be, you're nowhere. That's not it. It's according to the next minute, I haven't even begun. According to the next opportunity in front of me, my spiritual consciousness has not even begun. Chidush kamoini lo haya me'olam. Chidush kamoini lo haya me'olam asur lihiyot zaken. It is forbidden to grow old. What happens is that if a person goes through a whole year with their hasagos, they grow old, God forbid. A year without a Purim leads into ziknus. And therefore, a person needs a Purim because it's that face-to-face encounter with, I remember I'm a kof. I'm a monkey. I'm pretending. I'm mimicking. I'm mimicking the words. I'm mimicking what it means to be a mensch. I'm mimicking what it means to try and figure out what being a conscious creature in this strange loop actually is. And it's a la'at, and it's a ma'at, and it's a gradational process. That recognition only takes place in the terror of having lost everything we thought made us who we are. Purim is an encounter with the halal. Purim is an encounter with kasha avadati, I have nothing. I have nothing. I'm in the Beis HaTzlamim. I lose moichin. There's a Nasira. Chachma leaves me. But the miracle of Purim is what? The miracle of Purim, as we're going to see, is that that light always remains. The light is never separate. The light of Zer Anpin is never separate from Malchus. But rather, it's just appearing as absent so that we can come to understand our innermost point. But the monkeys laugh at us. The monkeys take all of our osios. Peddler looked at the monkeys, and the monkeys looked at the peddler. He didn't know what to do. Finally, he spoke to them, meaning it's a mirror image, right? He is the monkey. All of his asagos are revealed to be kofiyut, the maisa kof. And he says, you monkeys, he said, shaking his finger at them, you give me my caps back. But the monkeys only shook their fingers back at him and said, tss, tss, tss. This made the peddler angry, right? What happens after trying, right? After the stages of grief, when a person encounters the loss of what they feel is their identifying factor. So we go into dabda, right? We go into denial. We deny the fact that we've lost what identifies ourselves. Then we go into anger and we feel angry about those who took away what we feel identifies who we are. Then we go into bargaining, which is trying to figure out how I can still be who I am, even though things have shifted. Then we go into a state of somewhat depression where we come to terms with having lost something. Then a person comes to acceptance. And so in the stages of losing what we feel is our spiritual identities, so first he tries bargaining with them. And again, it's none of the stages mean anything really, and they don't take place in any order. They're just a nice frame. But so he goes through the shaking his finger at them and he's imitated. And then he gets angry. Kas comes next. Kas. In that place of losing the mind, what happens most is anger. Anger, because anger is perpetually a reaction and a thrashing outwards when one feels the loss of control inwards. Making myself bigger, more present than I actually feel. The smaller a person feels, the more forceful they reveal themselves, the louder they speak. This made the peddler angry. He felt he was losing control because his hasagos were nowhere to be found. His mind was gone. His hats were gone. The makifim were gone. And he says, you monkeys, you give me back my cats. But the monkeys only shook both of their hands back at him and he said, tss, tss, tss. So we go, today we learned about the etzba and the yad in the Ramchal. So it goes from the finger to the hand. And he says, tss, tss, tss. Now he felt quite angry, right? The anger grows. Anger is a midah that knows no end. It's avodah zarah mamish. It's rooted fundamentally with gaiva. They're two sides of the same coin. It's the kelzar, it's the elzar within the individual. As the Commander Rebbe points out, that nobody goes through life without being over the isser of not making themselves into a god. Everybody is operating with this egoism. This is where Achashverosh is at in the story. He felt quite angry, and now he started stomping his feet. And he said, you monkeys, you better give me back my caps. He's utilizing all of his reservoirs. He uses his hands, his maisam. He uses his feet, his avodah begashmias, to try and get back the hasaga, to try and get back that mind that he thought he was dependent on. And he says, you better give me back my cats. But the monkeys only stamped their feet back at him and said, tss, tss, tss. By this time, the peddler was really very, very angry. He stomped both his feet and shouted, you monkeys, you must give me back my cats. But the monkeys only stamped both their feet back at him and said, tss, tss, tss. In this place, the natural attempt to regain composure based on accomplishment is always going to be rooted in failure. It might last for a moment, but a person is forced to come to that place of Abba She'ena Tali B'davar. Over and over, a person has to try and spark themselves back again to find what is worthy, and until a person comes to the fact that I'm searching for Nekudos Tovos is the Nekuda Tova. I may not be able to find the Nekuda Tova, but let me find the Nekuda Tova in the fact that I'm trying to find the Nekuda Tova. And that only comes about by trying and failing and trying and failing and trying by failing. And here's where it's a really important Nekuda Chevra, and I want to just bring out one more Hakdama. That what takes place in any tzimtzum, what we're most concerned about in any tzimtzum is yeyush, is hopelessness, is despair. Because despair is a reaction to emptiness. And every tzimtzum, and every apparent shtira, and every apparent moment of nesira is an apparent encounter with emptiness. And so whenever there's a new halal that awakens, there's a new moment of falling into yeyush. And so Rabbi Nachman revealed something fundamental to the degree that there has to be two ways in which we approach this forbidden thing called yesh and hopelessness. That on the one hand, we have to say that it's forbidden because it needs to be understood that this is a really bad place to hang out. Yesh is the opposite of spirituality because in truth, there's no emptiness whatsoever. It's getting caught up in the mitzidenu too much. There's no emptiness in the Welt. There's no emptiness anywhere. Everything is malay v'gadush. Everything is filled and saturated. Leis aser paniminei. But it appears as empty. And so there's always a havamina of yesh. So Rabbi Nachman said it's not enough to tell people it's aser to be miyayesh. Why? Because the mere fact that yesh is a possibility is already yesh inducing. The main reality that, oh my gosh, I can lose hope by dint of the fact that I know I'm forbidden to lose hope, and if I'm forbidden to lose hope, then losing hope must be a possibility, and that's nice and tam lifkam, that the possibility of loss of hope pollutes the individual, and the tikva, and the hope, and the kav can't reveal itself within the chalal hapanai. Mordechai can't be yotze back into Shushan Abira. Mordechai can't reveal himself within the Welt. The tzaddik can't be fully revealed. And so Rabbi Nachman says, we all agree, asur lehityesh, one is not allowed to give up hope. But there has to be a secondary teaching, a more potent teaching. The more potent teaching is that ein shum yesh bo'olam klal. There's no such thing as hopelessness whatsoever. That's a very different notion than saying it's forbidden to lose hope. Saying that forbidden to lose hope implies the reality of hopelessness. I'm just forbidden to do it. Saying that hopelessness does not exist is the recognition that no, there's no emptiness whatsoever. There's no such thing as hopelessness. The entire existence of self itself is a shtick of hope. Kaveh kavisi el Hashem. That's the secret of what the neshama is. It's in a perpetual state of hoping. If I'm alive, if I'm conscious, I'm in a state of hope. My neshama is perpetually in a state of hope, no matter what state it finds itself in. And that recognition for Rabbi Nachman was more fundamental form of medicine to realize that even if I lose hope, I'm also going to be okay because I know that even in the loss of hope, there's no such thing as losing hope. Now, imitation, sitra achra, the other side, the recognition with our deficiencies, that can go as high as hopelessness. It can go as high as forbidden to lose hope. Because we can be over the issur of losing hope. If we look at ourselves in that monkey-like state where we're questioning ourselves, Rahman al-Itzlan, a person can, God forbid, come to a place of losing hope. But what that side doesn't understand is the radical secret of Ein Shum Yesh Ba'olam Klal. The other side, Haman can't be masig the Sharnun. The Sharnun is Ein Shum Yesh Ba'olam Klal. The 49 Sharm of Bina are that Asur Lehit Yesh. Sharnun is Ein Shum Yesh Ba'olam Klal. The other side cannot understand Ein Shum Yesh Ba'olam Klal. Because at the core, the Jew is not imitating. The Jew is not a monkey. The Jew is a Nakuda of Elikus that's Melubish Beguf Kavyachol. It's a secret of Chelek Eloi Kamimal, Mamish, Mamish Kavyachol, Mamish Kavyachol, Mamish. And in that place, in that Nakuda Pnimius, it's no longer imitation. And that place is awoken when? In Yeush. In powerlessness where a person gets to that place of kasher avadati, I have nothing left. I've lost the Shem Havaya. I don't have the 4 osios. I don't have the 16 hats. All that's left is the checkered sense of self. In that place, a person reaches upwards to the highest place of kasher avadati, and they draw down something higher than the other side, which is the secret of Ein Shum Yesh Ba'olam Klal. And we're going to see this in our story. He gives hope up. He loses hope. He couldn't get the hats back from the monkeys with his finger. He couldn't get it back with his hands. He couldn't get it back with both hands. Couldn't get it back with his foot. Couldn't get it back with both feet. And so he loses hope, and he throws his own checkered hat down. He takes off his own identity. He says, if I don't have hasagos, then I'm nothing. And in that gesture of hopelessness, we're going to see that's Yeshuasam Hayisalanetzach. That's where the Yeshua comes, because when a Yid enters into that place of Yeyush Shaloimidas, of Adilo Yada ben Arham Baruch Mordechai, of Oichlim from the Suda of Achashverosh, I don't know what's up, I don't know what's down. I don't know anything. In that place, person goes down into the Nakuda Pnimis, the one piece of self that always remains, that 17th chelak of Tov that's hidden within the self, and that's what grows. So at last he became so angry that he pulled off his own cap. He threw it to the ground and he began to walk away. But then each monkey pulled off his cap. All of the gray caps and the brown caps and the blue caps and all of the red caps came flying down out of the tree. The Yid comes to the recognition that you're right, Hashem, kasher avadati, I have absolutely nothing. But in that place of having absolutely nothing, I find everything. I say, Hashem, my relationship with you is independent of all things. I have nothing but you. Forget about everything else that I thought I was. I erase all of those layers, mechika after mechika after mechika, uncovering layers and layers of artificial senses of self and what I identify myself as. And I come to the core of self where I recognize that kasher avadati, in that place, it's just me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's where the nace takes place. Again, Mordechai Tzaddik always knows what's taking, but each of us are Esther. And in that place, it comes out from that place of Yeush, where Ein Shum Yesh Ba'olam Klal is Niskala. In the act of Yeush, Ein Shum Yesh Ba'olam Klal is Niskala. I remember the best way, I'm sorry for going longer, the best way I like to describe this in terms of powerlessness is that it used to be on like a BlackBerry phone that it didn't have enough battery power to make a phone call. So it would kind of die and you couldn't make a phone call. But there was some clause, it must be, that if you had to make an emergency phone call, so if you dialed an emergency number, the battery kind of jumped back into some hidden reservoir of hitherto unrevealed power energy, and it taps the phone back into callability. And so what you would discover is that you can tap 911, and then you end the 911 call, and then you can make a normal phone call. So it's like we're tricking. Yeush is a trick to the degree that I say it's 911, I have to call out. There's no battery power left, Kavyachol. And specifically in that place of recognizing there's no battery power left, the person reveals, there was more battery power there to begin with. And in that place, Shuasam Hayisalanetzach. So what happens is the peddler picks up his caps and he puts them back on his head. Again, the goal is not to let go of the mind. The goal is to take the mind off and put the mind back on. Taking the self off and putting the self back on. That's the avodah of mikvah. That's the avodah of the tahara of Purim. That's the avodah of ad lo yada, or the sleep. It's taking the self off coming to terms with the fact that in the innermost core, devoid of every accomplishment, devoid of every word uttered, devoid of every gesture revealed in this Welt, I'm with you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as close as I could possibly be, even if I accomplished 1,000,000 times higher than what I think I could accomplish. The Toiva Ani Be'enav, the Nakuda Pnimis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is never closer than as close as possibly can be. We're always in Kodesh HaKadoshim. There's a part of us, that Yechida Shebenefesh, that part that remains, and Malchus Shebemalchus, that Yechida, that undying hope of ancient Yeshua and Klal that remains. And then we can put our hats back on, and then we can grow more hats, and we can go and sell the hats. The world needs hats. Everybody needs something. Every person is a tzaddik. Every person is a mashpia. Every person has something to sell in this world. The world is a marketplace. But one day a year, a person has to go into the country and they have to fall asleep by the tree of Adelo Yada ben Aram and Baruch Mordechai, where they come to terms with self in its base sense of self, where it grows. So the peddler picked up his caps and he put them back on his head. First, his own checkered cap, right? That's the most important thing. Then the gray caps and the brown caps, the blue caps and the red caps at the very top. And slowly, la'at, he walked back into town calling, caps for sale, 50 cents a cap. No, we should be zeicha to take ourselves off and put ourselves back on, to come to the place of kitoiva ani be'enav, the recognition that every yid is a chidush kamona lohaya me'olam, and that the bond between Nishmas Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, wherever it finds itself, is so fundamentally connected that it's impossible to ever begin to speak about distance, no matter what, even when it's erased, even when it's fully erased, even when it's ein loy chelik lo'olam haba. Dorshei Rishumos come along and they say, no, yesh chelik lo'olam haba. The Dorshei Rishumos are those who are continuously scrubbing underneath everything to find the golden diamond that rests at the heart of each and every yid. And when we come to terms with this checkered hat of ourselves, so then we're zeicha to enter in to Purim, and we like Yehudim Ha'Sa'or v'Simcha v'Sasim v'Yikar. The self is transformed into Hasaga. And then when I'm masig myself, when I come to a place of recognizing that I'm with you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we get our hats back on, and then we have more Hasaga, and then again we prepare for the next Purim to take the hats off again. Be'ezras Hashem.